Good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started this evening so that we can hopefully get folks home before too late in the evening. Welcome to a special workshop meeting of the Washington City Council. We asked Burlington Northern if they would come down and be so kind as to do a meeting with the council and take some questions, take a look at a little bit of presentation that they've got, and we're trying to allow us to do that. Not only that, they allowed us to expand it a little bit and invite some of the other elected officials from throughout our region that are on the road tracks as well. So we've got our Washington City Council here. We're hoping Councilmember Daniel will join us shortly. Councilmembers Boger and Freeman are absent this evening. Also up here on the dais, Karen, there you are. Karen Rubinow from the Washington School Board. Grover Lasky, Mayor of Woodland. Ron Onslow, Mayor of Richfield. Greg Anderson, Councilmember from Camas. Mike Walton, Councilmember from Longview. And Amy Weisfeld, Councilmember from Stevenson. And then we've got some other officials that are here in the audience as well. Dave Scott, our city administrator, is up here on the dais with Rose. Bob Gregory, city manager of Longview. And Bob is also the outgoing president of the Washington State City Managers Association as well. So there's a couple of hats here. Steve Stewart, I saw you sneak in. And Lynn Sumner. City manager out in Richfield. Dick Swinhart, our fire chief from Camas, Washington. And then Ron Tarzan, I saw here, who made the leave a few minutes early. Here she is right here for a school board meeting this evening as well. From Burlington Northern, we've got Patrick Brady, Director of Hazardous Materials. And sorry the back is to you. We had to set it up this way to get through the presentation, and then we'll flip people around so that you can actually see some faces later. Courtney Wallace, Director of Public Affairs here in the Northwest. And then Christopher Delargy, the Vancouver Terminal Manager. The process we're going to follow this evening. Burlington Northern has a presentation that they're going to do that just talks about some of their processes, some of the information that lays the groundwork for this evening's discussion. All in all, I'm told that with that and clarifying questions getting through the presentation, that's going to take us about an hour, and then we'll go to general questions and answers from the panels that are up here. For the folks that are up here on stage, we do have some paper and pens available to you. I'd ask as we go through the presentation if you just make notes or questions that you want to come back to that are clarifications of the presentation. I don't anticipate breaking into the presentation to take questions during it, just so we can get through it all in a timely fashion. For the audience, enjoy. My apologies that you don't have a role in this evening other than being here and being able to hear the questions and the answers directly. This is a session that we really want to put together for the council who had some questions going into our processes and discussions on resolutions and how we feel about training, street traffic, and the types of roads in general. So this is really a time for them and the other elected officials that are here as well in order to get some of those questions answered as we work through that. So I'm sure that we'll have some folks that will be around afterwards, but in the meantime, we ask that you just listen along and we'll see how things go. With that, Courtney, I'm going to turn it over to your folks.
Thank you so much, Mayor Guard, and members of the Washington City Council and other elected officials in the region. Thank you so much for having us out here today. We really appreciate it, and we understand that road safety is an important topic and something that we take very seriously as a railroad. And so for tonight, with our presentation, Patrick and I will go through that, just give you an overview about BNSF and our role here in Washington, and then talk about our safety program, which really is a part of tonight's conversation. So just a little bit about BNSF. We are owned by Berkshire Hathaway, and we are primarily a Western railroad. We operate 28 states and 2 Canadian provinces, and we move about 1/4 of the nation's freight rail. We operate about 1,500 freight trains a day, and we have more than 40,000 employees. And unlike other modes of transportation, we finance and pay for our infrastructure, which includes all of our rail, our bridges, tunnels, and other infrastructure. And this is a map here in Washington State. We have 3 east-west routes. We have Stevens Pass, the Stampede Pass, and then the Columbia River Gorge route, as well as the I-5 corridor. And the nice thing about Washington is the flexibility of the network that we do have, and the access it provides for Washington, which is the most trade-dependent state in the Union, access to our most strategic trading partner, Canada, as well as access to Asia from our deepwater ports in the state. Just a little bit about us here in Washington. We handle about 1.5 million carloads annually. We invested $235 million in the state this year for railroad maintenance, safety, technology, and expansion. Last year, in 2013, we spent $125 million. And we have about 3,500 employees in the state, and that is spread throughout the state. It's not just concentrated in Seattle, because again, we have large employee populations throughout, including here in Southwest Washington. We also have the BNSF Foundation, which provides grants and financial assistance to communities across our rail line. And last year, in the state of Washington, we gave about $600,000. And just a little bit more about the impact of freight rail in Washington. Earlier this year, the Washington Council on International Trade, BNSF, funded a study that really looked at what is the economic value of freight rail in the state. And it's not just BNSF, it's all freight rail, so our partners at the Union Pacific and some of the other short lines. And what we found is that freight rail contributes at least $28.5 billion to the state economy, and that household incomes in the state are about, that actually should be 5,000. Income is 5,000 more due to freight rail, not 13.4 billion. But over 342,000 Washington workers depend on freight rail. Again, freight rail really is the economic driver for freight here in Washington and the United States. And so, as I mentioned, we do pay for our own infrastructure, and so our capital commitment in 2014 was $5 billion. And in 2014, that was the most of any time any railroad has spent. Our capital for 2015, our capital plan will be $6 billion. And so where is that money going? So the vast majority of it, at $2.3 billion, is what we call core network and related assets. So that's the rail, that is all of that infrastructure. $1.6 billion is going to locomotives and freight cars and other equipment. What I will say about our locomotives fleet is it is the youngest and most fuel efficient in the country. We're actually buying 500 locomotives this year to add to our fleet. And we're also spending $900 million on expansion and efficiencies, and $200 million on something that's called PTC, or Positive Train Control. That is a GPS safety system that is mandated by the federal government. So again, we look at where the business is coming, with how we maintain the rail, how we expand, to make sure that we're running the safest operation that we can. And so for today, one of the things I've made you is 5, 5, and 5. So we're spending $5 billion this year. We're adding 500 new locomotives to our fleet, and we're actually hiring 5,000 people this year alone, and that includes here in the state of Washington. And it is some for attrition for folks who are retiring, but we are adding additional employees, we are adding additional headcount, so that we have the folks in place to make sure that we're running as efficiently as possible, running as safely as possible, and expanding that expertise for areas in engineering, affairs, and train crews, and all those folks who really do run and make the rails as safe as possible. And the other thing that I'll comment on freight rail in general, it is the most environmentally friendly way to move anything on land. We are able to move 1 ton of freight 500 miles in a single gallon of diesel. And we also have the most fuel efficient fleet in the United States. And so one of our double stack trains is able to take about 287 trucks off the road. So that helps ease highway congestion, it helps ease road congestion, which I know as the population continues to increase, you're going to have demand for goods continue to increase, and that's going to put more freight, that's going to put more traffic on the rails, but it also puts more traffic on highway systems, on roads, and also on marine. So again, the more that we can put on the rails, it does take that freight off the roads. And so with that, I will turn it over to Pat, who will talk about our safety program.
Thanks, Courtney. Again, my name is Patrick Brady. I'm the Director of Hazardous Materials for BNSF. So my primary responsibility for BNSF is emergency planning, preparedness, and response. to hazmat incidents. I'm out of Fort Worth, Texas. I have system responsibility. But I have a manager of hazmat in Vancouver, Washington, Justin Piper. So his territory includes all the state of Washington and Oregon. So my part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about really 3 legs of the stool: prevention, response, and remediation. Without one of those, the stool tips over when we have a problem. Gordon? So when we look at this, this slide shows our injury rate for 200,000 man hours. You can see BNSF versus the rest of the railroad industry. 2013 was the safest year in record for BNSF. You can see we're quite a bit better than our rail partners. In 2014, it's turning out to be even safer than 2013. Courtney talked about this earlier, and this is our employee injury rate. You can see that it drops from 1980 to 2013, 80%. And again, 2.3, and these are rail equipment incidents per million train miles, and these are derailments. So this is the derailments that we have. You can see that it's a bit better than 2012, and again 2014, we're going to be right at about 2 incidents per million train miles. So Courtney talked about this, and then we own or maintain our own right-of-way. And that allows us to do our own inspections, along with both the Federal Railroad Administration and the state DOT inspectors that go through. So the track that runs through Washougal is inspected daily by our track inspector. You probably see them driving in a white pickup truck, a high rail truck on the rails. And so they're looking at least once a day, and sometimes more than once a day. Some of our key chemical routes are inspected 4 times a day. And then we also utilize both weather and earthquake inspection. So we have a system very much like weather.com that looks specifically at our tracks and looks for what weather events could cause interruptions or derailments. Things like heavy rain, heavy wind, potential slides, mudslides, rock slides, and also earthquake issues. So there's different type of inspections: the visual inspection that the track inspector does, and there's more sophisticated inspection. So here's a picture of our track geometry car. So what this car does, goes through the area and looks for defects in the track structure, both in the subgrade, the ballast, and also on the rail itself. So what we're looking for is things that could cause potentially broken rail or an issue with cross grade that could potentially cause broken. So the other thing that we have, so what we do is we inspect the track. When you look at what causes a derailment, you can look at really 3 pieces of a pie. The first one is track-related issues. So we mitigate that by track inspection, track geometry, rail fly detection. The other one is equipment. Equipment would be a problem with one of the rail cars. So up there on the slide, what you're seeing is a worn bearing detector, and as you drive through the Columbia River Gorge, you'll see our track and you'll see some of these detectors. By industry practice, we need to put these detectors on our key chemical route every 40 miles on to the area through Washougal and along the Columbia River. We have them about every 26 miles. So industry standard for chemical routes is 40 miles. Along in this area, we have them every 26 miles. So what you're seeing there is a worn bearing detector. So one of the things that potentially can cause a derailment is the roller bearing on a rail car. And so like any kind of bearing that you have in a wheel on your car, a bearing that you have on a fan, if a bearing goes out, what could happen is that you create a lot of heat and you can actually burn off that roller bearing itself. So as the train goes by this worn bearing detector, it'll actually measure the temperature of the bearings as they go by. If the detector finds a bearing that has elevated temperature, it actually radios the conductor and the engineer in the lead locomotive, telling them the exact axle that they have an issue with the worn bearing, and the conductor and the engineer will stop the train and inspect that car and set it out. So normally there's a set-out track, a parallel track, just adjacent to these worn bearing detectors. The newer technology, instead of a worn bearing detector, is an acoustical bearing detector, and so instead of looking for the temperature, they actually, we have microphones that actually listen to the train as it's going by, kind of blanks all the noise that we're not concerned about, but a very high frequency pitch of a bearing that's about to go up. That computer and that microphone technology listens for that and the same issue that the car will be set up. We also have rail impact or wheel impact detectors. From time to time, wheels may get flat spots on the wheel, and they'll start hammering as they go down the track because the wheel is no longer around. And what those detectors do is they detect that wheel that is flat. Flat wheels causes problems for two reasons. One, they can cause a broken rail by hammering that rail, and also it could cause a wheel to break. Same thing with the worn bearing or acoustical bearing detectors. Then that car is set out of train, and our carman from Vancouver will come and replace that wheel. So what you see a picture here is our network operations center in Fort Worth. So all the trains in this area are dispatched out of Fort Worth. So here's a picture of it. So in the event of an emergency, what happens is the train crew would call what we call our service interruption desk or our emergency operations center. And those would be the people that would call up the local 911, the state and the federal responders. So there has been a lot of discussion in the press about the DOT 111 tank car, or what we call the general service tank car. And just kind of the background of it, this car has been improved as time goes on, but generally that car has been around for the last 25 to 30 years. In 2011, crude was really at the infancy stage. We were moving a lot of unit trains of ethanol, which is drinking out alcohol that they use to add to gasoline. We started to have some issues relative to the legacy DOT 111 tank cars. So the Association of American Railroads, which are all Class 1 railroads, are members of the Association of American Railroads, petitioned the tank car committee to come up with a new tank car for flammable liquids, and that was called CPC 1232. We actually petitioned the Department of Transportation to accept this as a federal standard. But what this tank car does is a legacy DOT 111 tank car has 7/16" carbon steel, and the CPC 1232s have thicker shells, half-inch. Some of them have thermal protection and jackets. About 3/4 of the tank cars that move through Washougal are the CPC 1232 cars. Currently, there is a rulemaking through the Department of Transportation, and they're trying to determine what the car of the future will look like. What the American Petroleum Institute and the Association of American Railroads said was the proper tank car for flammable liquids is a tank car that has 1/2" carbon steel, thermal protection, a jacket, head shields, and roller protection. So I'm going to define what each of those are. So thicker steel prevents punctures. So again, the legacy 111 tank cars are 7/16, so this is a little bit thicker than the legacy DOT 111 tank car. But what's important about the car, the petition car as we call it, is it requires to have thermal protection. So thermal protection is not like insulation. Insulation in the building keeps the people in the building either hot or cold. That crude oil really doesn't care if it's hot or cold. What we're trying to do in a derailment, that if you have a fire, that what we're trying to do is protect the metal of that tank car so the metal doesn't heat up, and then you would have a blister that would cause what we call heat use tear, which is when you see a bunch of crude oil being pressure pushing it out of that car. So again, what the new tank car is about 76% better than the DOT 111 tank car. So that is the petition car. So we don't know what the Department of Transportation is going to do yet. Again, it's in the rulemaking right now, we think that end of December, January or February, they should come out with their final rule. Once the final rule is out, there's going to be at that point in time, all new tank cars must meet the new standard. And then the older tank cars, both the CPC 1232 cars and the legacy cars, there's going to be a retrofit requirement to bring it up to this new standard. So in this slide, you can see that we have 212 hazmat responders at 60 different locations. I talked about Justin Piper. He's one of the 212, but Justin's a full-time hazmat person for BNSF. Our 212 responders are additional duties, so our mechanical foremen, who the closest ones to here would be in Vancouver. Each one of our responders has 80 hours of initial training and about 40 hours of refresher training. So if we have an incident in Justin, may not be in Portland, Vancouver, time of the incident, our responders will come in and work with the local fire department or local first responders. We also utilize pre-approved contractors that would come in and do transfers, industrial fire protection, air monitoring, that type of thing. So this slide talks about the hazmat training that we do for the communities. And this slide shows that on average we train about 3,500 first responders every year. Because of the concern of crude oil, we heard the communities. And so in 2014 we trained over 8,000 responders system-wide. 800 of those were in Washington State. So when we do this training, we bring in our trainers, including myself, Justin Piper, and we do an instructor-led class, PowerPoint presentation, about 2 hours in length, and for our technician-level responders, we'll bring in training tank cars, both a crude oil car, CPC 1232 car, and our training tank car, so the first responders can see how the car comes together, potential leak sources for those cars, and how to respond safely and appropriately for that. Another training opportunity that we had in 2014, and we're bringing it to 2015, is that we sponsored local responders to go to a intense 3-day crude by rail emergency response class at the Security Emergency Response Training Center in Pueblo, Colorado. Again, it's 3 days. The BNSF sponsored over 700 responders to go to that. There was one responder from Schuylkill that went. We paid their tuition and travel expenses to attend that class. And here just shows the 2013 stats on where we do the training. So we also have specialized equipment along our right-of-way to mitigate some of the hazards that we have. We have industrial firefighting trailers. The closest trailer is in Vancouver. It's really a fire truck without an engine. Normally, for our larger trailers, there are two 500-gallon totes of firefighting foam, 2 fire pumps, 2 10,000-gallon full-load bladders, any kind of connection so we can connect up with the local fire department's fire truck. But we also can hook to draft out the river. We can hook to vac trucks, frac tanks, that type of thing. We also have emergency breathing air trailers in case whatever material at release is toxic by inhalation. We can protect the responders. We also have specialized capping kits, flooring kits, middling kits. We conduct air monitoring assessments. So we have what we call the tactical toxicology program that we utilize our contractors to go do air monitoring. And in the event of an incident that may cause evacuation, we bring in PhD level industrial hygienists and toxicologists to work with the community, the health departments, to make sure that the evacuation is safe and prudent, and to be able to provide as much information to the community as we possibly can. We also have spill response equipment located in this area along the river. Closest spill response equipment is in the Vancouver Portland area. So the other thing that it's important to realize too, in the event of an incident and we had a spill, what would occur is that we bring out our contractors, our consultants, and at the site it's not only BNSF, it's local responders, fire department, maybe public health would be there, And the state of Washington, Department of Ecology would have responders there. The EPA would have responders there. And in this area also, because we're so close to Columbia River, the Coast Guard would be there. So we would operate within the Unified Incident Command. And part of that Unified Incident Command would be the environmental section. And we would discuss and come up with strategies on how to properly remediate the environment. So we pay for it. It's our contractors, it's our consultants that are actually doing the work, but it's provided by oversight from the local, state, and federal regulators to make sure that we clean up to their standards. We do background sampling and cleanup sampling to make sure it meets their cleanup levels.
And that's it for our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. And again, appreciate your time for us.
Would you like to start? We have microphones on both tables. That you have a rusting that's on there as well. So no, just Dave.
I missed the deadline for all 1232 cars.
And here, I think.
Dave, we can't hear you.
That better? That better?
So I believe the question was, what's the deadline for the CPC 1232 cars?
Yes. When will you have all 1232 style cars coming through Washington?
So that is a very difficult question to answer. And let me give you a little background and the reason why it is difficult to answer. We don't own the rail cars. As a common carrier, as long as our customers properly package it and describe it, the hazardous material, and put it in a DOT spec package, we have to accept the transportation. So if a customer would offer to us a legacy DOT 111 tank car, there's nothing that could allow us to not move that material. So last time we looked is what 75% of the cars or CPC 1232 cars are coming through. There's a report that comes out that I get every morning. It's on a morning report. And we look at that number is getting better every day. I think that once we have a final rule from the DOT, we'll have some clarity on how long it's going to take. There is some pressure being put on our customers to start moving towards the CPC 1232 car, but I cannot give you a specific date.
And I will add on to that. Some of our customers, to Sarah in particular, have guaranteed that they will move only the 1232 cars or whatever the latest standard is going to be. So you are seeing more customers making that commitment to making sure it is the 1232 car. And as Pat mentioned, that number is continuing to grow. But as a common carrier under the U.S. Constitution, we do have to accept all regulated products, so whether that's crude oil, ethanol, other hazardous materials, or lumber, or anything else that we do. But bottom line is, we're going to take delivery of that. We're going to do it in the safest way possible.
Do the customers own the cars, or do they rent them or lease them?
Actually, they do both. So our customers lease the cars, and some of our customers own the cars. We really want to get the safest possible car that's available. So once the DOT makes their final rule, we're on record of saying that we're going to purchase 5,000 of the standard car that the DOT comes up with. So I said that we don't own these cars. It'll be something that we've really never done. In the past, we owned hopper cars, we owned box cars, we owned flat cars. Currently, the only tank cars that we own are for our own diesel fuel service. And all of our new cars are CPC 1232 cars. But when the final rule is published, we're going to purchase 5,000 of those cars and give them, and lease them to our customers to drive more of the newer cars, even better than the CPC 1232 cars in the market.
I have another Does Burlington Northern have plans in the near or future to expand to a double rail through Washougal?
So the question was, do we have plans to add additional track or double track in Washougal?
So the current plan is nothing is scheduled for 2015, but we currently have plans for 2016 to double track east. So from the siding at Washougal, which in our railroad is roughly milepost 28 or probably 32nd Street, that area, east to a place what we call Mount Pleasant, which is about 4.5 miles east. And so that would be all what we call two-lane traffic. And we do that based on volumes that we see, what our market brings, where it was planned for 2015 and got pushed to 2016. So next year we'll reevaluate whether or not we do go ahead with that. It'll be based on the type of volumes we're seeing on the river.
But not west? Not through Washougal?
No, the only expansion which we just put in service was a new siding at Camas. So it's right adjacent to the mill. So the mill currently doesn't cross our tracks anymore, so it's safer for them. They have a new route to move back and forth. And we have a siding there, so which should help really, all the different communities. So something won't have to meet past that you have to leave Vancouver, get all the way to Washougal to have to meet. So when you have closer meet past places, actually the infrastructure will smooth or more smoothly, depending on your whatever, however you do it. But it should help with rail traffic in both directions, having a new siding and Camas. But currently the plan is to double track. I will tell you that we own right away that we can double track from here, probably east, that is Skinny and Messi. But nothing's in the works.
And what I'll add on to our plans, we do advance long-term planning. As Chris alluded, we do look at that year by case to see our plans are driven by market. It's not kind of a field of dreams concept that if we build something, we hope the business will be there. So if the business is there, the market dictates that we will look at what those expansion plans are. So things can change. And so we continually evaluate those processes and what the plans are. And so again, rail traffic volumes have ebbed and flowed over the last several years. Our peak volumes are 2006. We have a very robust economy. Housing boom was going on, so you have construction levels, you have a lot of timber, a lot of lumber, what we call international intermodal, so traffic coming in from other countries, imports was very high. The economy dropped significantly, saw rail traffic go down along with that. But as the economy started to recover, you are seeing rail traffic start to come back up. It's a different mix than it was in 2006, but we are looking again, investing where it makes sense to make sure that we have a really strong fluidity in our system so we can get that traffic moving and get all the products from point A to point B.
I'd like to follow up on that. The same question going north. I know that there is some extension or addition of another rail in certain areas, but are you planning the same thing, the same question going north from Vancouver?
Yeah, so currently there is a federal and Washington state project in association with BNSF, and so we'll be building a third lane track on the east side of the Kalama, where really a little span between where both elevators are, Temco elevator and also the one to the north there at P, which is called the Kalama Export. So then there's also another expansion that they're planning for on the east side of the world. And this is a state subsidized plan with the help of federal funding for really it's for to increase in more efficiency for the passenger to get around certain areas that are very congested.
One of my the primary concerns here is what it does to traffic in Schuylkill. We have 5 grade crossings and 1 grade separated crossing. And of course, crossings are a piece of infrastructure that the railroad does not fund. What I'm curious about is a couple of numbers, which will let me do a little calculation here. What is the speed limit through Washougal? And what is the maximum grade that one of these trains has configured as it comes through here can pull? That would, for instance, if you stop a train on one of the sidings to let a highball go through, how long does it take to clear the 32nd Street crossing? And at peak traffic, how far out under 14 does that back up the traffic? That's probably my highest concern at this moment. So, what's the maximum grade and what's the speed limit?
So you want the maximum speed limit of any train?
Well, one of these trains through Washougal. Any of your mile and a half, mile and a quarter long.
So the max speed is 60 miles an hour. The max speed for a crew train is 40 miles an hour.
Okay.
Okay, but if it's a intermodal train, if it's a grain train, it's 60 miles an hour through that area. And the only, your question only affects eastbound flow. Train coming west that goes in the siding doesn't affect our second or so.
Right.
You're just talking about one direction.
Right.
The siding switches are a 25 mile an hour switch, so that's what they enter in siding. Of course, then they have to slow down so that they're stopped by the other end of the siding, but technically the switch is good for a 25 mile an hour turnout, is what we call it. So depending on the engineer, depending on the type of train, depending on how many locomotives he has, or what he feels his handling are, he could enter that siding at the prescribed speed, 25, or maybe something lower depending on what he was saying. Our engineers have that ability to go slower if they necessary. So.
What I'm actually trying to figure out is, suppose you bring one of those trains to a dead stop on the siding, so you can let an eastbound train go by. How long does it take to clear the intersection on the other side? And if I knew the maximum grade that train can pull, it's high school physics on acceleration to figure out how long it takes to clear them.
Right, but there's no grade, as you know.
I understand.
So the grade is relatively zero, so you think they could probably be 5 or 6 minutes to clear if they're from the stop for our heaviest train. But remember, it also goes by what signal indication they have. So if they're following somebody and they could get a flashing red, they're not going to go that fast because it's kind of like a stoplight. You have to be prepared to stop, and that's what they have to do. If they leave on a green, then they can accelerate their locomotives based on what the signal indication is. So they have to travel by a signal system as well. And so it's not just one, there's just not one speed. But it's probably, if they could go out on a green at prescribed speed, it'd be clear in about 5 or 6 minutes.
Just, suppose it's 5 3/4 minutes. There are, on a peak load, 1,678 vehicles who go past that intersection, giving 20 feet for each. In that amount of time, you've got a 3,050-foot backup, which is, half of which is all the way out on the 14. And that's a major safety issue, not only for the city, and for 14, but also because of the fact that you start backing that up. People use our only grade crossing and back that up. Now, how do you get a fire truck or a police car up here?
We do work very closely with firefighters and other first responders, and if a train is stopped and it can't move for whatever reason, we are able to bring those trains. Those trains can be broken if need be, and there are 1-800 numbers posted at every single grade crossing. So we do work very closely with firefighters to make sure there is fluid movement, and we want to make sure that first responders can get to where they need to go. So in case of an emergency, we can break those trains. But that said, again, we try to keep those trains moving as we can. There are very rare instances where those trains aren't moving or they are completely stopped from dead and not able to move. But if there's a mechanical instance or something like that, we do try to make sure that we're monitoring that situation and we can break the train well.
With all due respect, I do understand the economics of keeping the trains running. And I see trains sit on the siding for several hours before they move in front of Safeway. So, and some of them are laden trains. They're not empty cars. You can see that because you can see the cargoes on. The safety issue for me is not, I mean, everybody wants to talk about Lac Megantic, and that's really not applicable here for all kinds of reasons. The lack of slope, the small line, all kinds of issues. On the other hand, Lynchburg, Virginia, as an example, is apropos. CSX, which is another Class 1 railroad with an excellent record, somewhere over a dozen cars derailed and it dumped 3 of them into the James River. They lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 gallons of bottled crude. Nobody knows quite how much went into the river and how much burned. We have our city water source, our well field, is within 100 feet of the tracks. I don't care what your emergency response is. You dump a train on top of that, and if you excuse my French, we are well and truly screwed. We don't have water for the city. We have a little bit of an interconnection with Camas, but it certainly could not supply the city. So those kinds of accidents, although extraordinarily rare, and I admit they're extraordinarily rare, are devastating. So that's a concern also. The other thing that I'm kind of curious about in terms of the economic impact is, suppose you add another 1.5 mile long train. Roughly how many employees does that add for Burlington North? Certainly the train crews, but also traffic, your switching yard and all of that kind of stuff. Do you have any idea how many employees that would add?
So we look at employment not per train, but really what those needs are. So in the state of Washington, we have about 3,500 employees, and we've been adding in certain different areas, certainly on our train crews, but we're also adding on our hazmat team, we've been adding on engineering and other like-minded. So breaking down by train and by increased volume, it impacts the entire railroad. So again, all the different departments that ultimately support our operations. And so again, that's for my group, for Pat's group, Chris's group as well, for the operations, engineering, the inspector. So again, as that volume increases, we take a look at what do we need to make sure that we're running a safe and efficient operation. So again, it's across the board.
And as part of the economy issue, if you put Wyoming or Montana coal in a train and run it through the state of Washington and put it on a ship to carry it somewhere, the economic value of that to Washington is de minimis. It's quite small. It's certainly much more important to Montana and Wyoming than it is to us. And the same thing is true with Bakken crude in terms of Montana and North Dakota. On the other hand, if you start crowding out grain trains because they are a lower profit margin than oil or coal, that's serious, because those people work in Washington and have their farms in Washington. And so I'm somewhat concerned about that kind of economic impact as well.
So I think there's been a lot of information about the service. Let me be very clear, we have had service challenges. That is an absolute truth. We've had service challenges for a couple of reasons, but there is a misperception out there that it's all oil and coal crowding out other products. So in 2013 and even in 2012, we saw what we call our Great Northern Tier, so from Chicago over to the Pacific Northwest. We saw just record volumes. Oil is part of that, but one thing I will say about oil is still only about 4 to 5% of our overall business. We also had a very robust grain agriculture bill. We had a very robust harvest. We also saw domestic intermodal grow as well, and that growth happened across our northern tier, which is something that frankly we weren't expecting, because usually growth happens throughout different parts of the network. And so to make sure that we are getting the capacity that we need to be more efficient, to make sure that Passion Rail, Amtrak, Sounder, and other commuter rails throughout our system have the capacity that we need. That's why we are adding more locomotives. We need power to be able to move the train, so adding an additional 500. Adding more people again to make sure that we have all the folks in place to run an efficient railroad, and also spending $5 billion. So we're adding additional capacity across our main lines, adding additional capacity, those double tracks, adding double tracks in places like Montana and North Dakota. That helps our system here, so we keep that fluidity moving. And so a lot of the projects that are coming online help add additional capacity. So we're adding double tracks between Spokane and Washington, Spokane and Pasco. That adds additional capacity and helps keep things moving. It helps the farmers here in Eastern Washington. It helps support Vancouver. Get the wind turbines out. It helps support Seattle and Port of Vancouver up in British Columbia. Just get those products moving. So again, service issues are certainly something that we are addressing. That's why again we're spending $6 billion next year to make sure that we have the most efficient operation and to serve all our customers.
Excuse me, if I may. Thank you. Amy Weiss, Salt City of Stevenson. A couple of questions. First of all, I heard you say, if I heard correctly, that the closest hazmat responder location is in Vancouver. Is that correct?
To here, yes ma'am, the closest BNSF hazmat responders are Vancouver.
Okay, so for my city being in Stevenson, which on a good day is 40 minutes to the east of Vancouver, my question is really around how. That's a long time to wait for first responders. Our fire department tells us they basically can do nothing. So for a city like ours, if we do have a James River kind of example, Virginia example, or a Quebec sort of situation, what are people in Fort Worth, Texas going to be able to do to get people to Stevenson?
So when we have an incident, one of our first things, myself and my field managers, are to get in contact with the local responders. So the fire department in Stevenson, we would get in communication with them to see what they have there, to provide any kind of input that we can to get the ball rolling. So once we get there, we can work towards mitigating that incident. In a hazardous material situation, it is, and I think the responders will tell you that it's not like a structure fire that you go in and you put a bunch of water on it and put it out, right? So one, we need to make sure that the community is protected. So the Stevenson Fire Department would be, in that period of time while we're responding to it, would be doing things like evacuation, shelter in place, that type of thing, while we get a response there. I think that, from really a response standpoint, that 40-minute time period will go very quickly. It will be working directly with your fire department.
Thank you. And along those lines, I heard you talk about training 3,500 first responders each year in various communities. Do you have 2015 training that will occur in this area? And how do we, as a group, get our emergency responders or fire departments involved in that?
So we're putting together our plan for 2015 on where we're going to do the training, and I would ask the people in this room to help us get our responders there, get your responders there. So we'll be more than happy to present our information. All we need is some help getting the responders to attend the class that we have.
So if you could perhaps make a note to let people in this group know when your 2015 training occurs in this area, and then we can take care of disseminating the information to our communities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the one thing I will say about the training is we've done several trainings in Vancouver through the board, and it's not just a one-time job. Hey, we check it off the box, we did training, and then we come back out. And 20 years later, it's continuous improvement, continuous training. And so, and we recognize that a lot of companies we run through are rural and they are volunteer firefighters. So it's not that we have a group of folks come out from Fort Worth, we're going to do it from 2 to 3 on a Wednesday, and that's the only time we'll do it. It's on their schedule. If it works best on the weekend, great, we'll do it on the weekend. If it makes sense on the evening, great, we'll do it then. It's really, we understand that it's time away from families, it's time away from the job. So we want to make sure it's as convenient as possible for our first responders.
I have a floating community in Ridgefield, Washington, and it's on the other side of the tracks, which means that if those crossings are blocked, they can't get to them. Recently, the train was stalled or stopped, and the fire department couldn't get across. I did not know if they called or if anything happened. I know they were stuck for about 5 minutes before they could get to the fire in the floating home community. And there were, to tell the story, there were 2 fatalities. However, the 2 fatalities were dogs, but the fact is that the fire department could not get to that floating home. And it's Pat, I can't think of your last name, Pat, I remember Pat, Brady. At any rate, one of the questions that the floating home communities had is as they come around the corner at Ridgefield, there's a lot of squealing, and they wonder if there would be sparks that could trigger a fire on a train. And along with that, when you mentioned the bearings and the flat wheels and the detectors that you have along the rail, my question would be is, first of all, what's the answer for that floating home community? And the second one is, when you do detect a bad bearing or a flat wheel, and I live along the track, so I can tell them too, it's easy, but at least flat wheels are. What happens when you do detect it? How long does it take you to address that problem?
Okay, so the question of when a train is going, and Chris may help clean this up for me. So when a train is going around a corner, when sometimes you hear that squealing, that is just a wheel flange rubbing against the rail. We do lubricate the rail, and so you shouldn't get a lot of that, but there is a potential for sparking. But to cause a fire of a unit crude oil train, that's not within the realm of possibility. That will not occur. So when on the failed equipment detector and the flat wheel detector, so just like as far as a failed equipment detector, if it's hot, if the bearing's hot, hit that car gets set up immediately. So the train stops. The crew gets a radio message and the train stops and that car gets set up. On the flat wheels are a little bit like a tire on your vehicle. So there's some flat wheels that, depending on the signature of that flat wheel, can go on to, let's say, Vancouver, because it's borderline on whether it's an issue or not, and a mechanical inspector needs to take a look at it. There's other flat wheels that they have to be set up immediately. So it all depends on the, I guess, the level of flatness of that wheel. That makes sense. Yes.
And if I could ask another question, and that is on the the mitigation, if there is any chance for some type of mitigation with the railroad and the cities. We are trying to build a bridge. It's $10 million more that we need to get that bridge across the rail so that we can address the floating home community and the 40 acres that are set up for commercial. Because we have only we have 3 at-grade crossings, one that goes into the refuge and 2 that go across. So we need to get that. And what kind of help can Burlington Northern give communities that have this problem? And Washougal has that same problem.
So on grade separations, it's an ongoing discussion, both at a national level and a local level. And so one of the things I can do is put you in touch with our private-public partnership group who really takes a look at those issues. One of the things that we really encourage and that we've been a part of are coalitions. There was back a while ago, there was a program called Fast Forward, which was a partnership on Puget Sound, so I believe it was from Everett down to Olympia, where you have the state DOT, the railroads, both Union Pacific and BNSF, and several communities coming together really to look at freight mobility, look at grade separations, look at the flow of rail, and pulling together funds to help build out some of these grade programs. For example, you have the Port of Everett contributing to a port or the Olympia project, the grade separation project there, because it benefited the entire region. So we really encourage those type of programs because you're able to elevate in one voice to go after federal dollars, go after state dollars as well, because it really needs to be a community effort to really look at grade separation programs. Something else that we're a part of is the Great Northern Corridor Coalition, and that is looking at the entire rail line, or actually the entire transportation system from Chicago to the Northwest. It's the state DOTs from that region, it's BNSF, and other ports and communities coming together. I believe the Port of Vancouver is a member, I believe the Port of Kansas and Washougal are a member as well. I believe so. But again, one of the things that they're looking at are grade crossings, and how do we look at different projects, how do we come together to fund those, what are priorities, how do we really look at that as one regional voice to help try to leverage more federal dollars.
Well, I just would make a comment on that, and then I'll give this microphone up, sorry. And that is that I see the billions of dollars spent and so forth, and $600,000 in grants. That doesn't hardly do a drop in the bucket as far as any kind of grade crossings, even on a quiet crossing. So we're doing everything that we can with the state and the feds. And if you know anything about the state of Washington, the transportation is not alive. It is dead. And I don't expect it to be alive this coming year. So we do have money from the feds, but not enough. So anyway, we're trying. It would speed up the trains. It would eliminate some of the deaths that we have. We have almost an average of a year out there, one a year, and it would make it a lot quieter and make the trains move a lot faster, I'm sure. So anyway, that's just a comment.
No, I do have you talking about
Hi. Are there any associated data in regards to the speed of the train and the related 111 and 1232 on rupturing at certain speeds, or is it even related to speed? Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, so it's really a lot on momentum, right? So the heavier the train, the faster the speed, the more likely that you would have a puncture. And so what you have to balance the thickness of the car versus adding weight. So if you add too much weight to the car, then you're going to add cars that they need to transfer the crude oil. So if you go to the Association of American Railroad website, AAR.org, it shows the different speeds in the puncture resistance of the cars, both 111 and CDC 1232. When I said that the new proposed car that we gave the Department of Transportation, it was about 80% better, and that's at 50 mile an hour speed restriction that we have right now. So at 50 miles an hour, the car that we propose is about 80% better than the current DOT.
And Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, the train speeds for the oil transfer for key trains is 40 miles per hour.
Well, no, it's actually 50 miles an hour unless you're in a high threat urban area, which is part of the Vancouver, Portland, high threat urban area, so it's 40 miles an hour.
Couple quick clarifying questions. Chris, you talked about sightings, adding sightings. Typically, how long are those sightings?
The one in Kansas is 9,000 feet. So they can range from, we don't like to build much less than that, so we'll try and sometimes we build sightings that will.
Do you know what we have on the east side of West Sheffield? Is it 2 sightings, or I think there are 2 sets of tracks and 2 sets of sightings, correct?
No, there's just one mainline sighting, and then we have a set out track that's on the Safeway side, which you'll heard the local people here will see. Sometimes maintenance away, but our local lift services, the Port of Washington, 3 days a week. That's what puts his cars to run on. There's only one on the entrance. Yeah, that he's got to run on his cars when he pulls out because he's heading east. So that's not a mainline side. The mainline side is the river side.
And then we got you had mentioned earlier, of your stuff, we had 212 incident responders system-wide. I assume those are bodies, not teams of response teams.
You get the bodies and then augmented with probably twice that with contract responders. So as an example, in Portland, Vancouver, we have a company called NRC that has probably 50 people, and then CCS probably has 30 more. So we augment our team with contract hazard responders.
Yeah, just a follow-up question on the first response. About how long would you say, and is there a standard or are there restrictions on how long you have to make a call for an incident response to a local community from the time that you hear about it in Fort Worth?
So, no, there's not. But I think it's really a bit of a two-way street. So just so we understand what the railroad is kind of up against when we have an incident. So, if you have an engineer conductor and they're in the lead locomotive, right? If a train goes to emergency, that means the little black hose that goes from car to car, it releases air and the train stops. So that could be caused by a number of things. One of them is a derailment. So the conductor gets off the train and the locomotive watches the train. When they see that there's a derailment, that's when they notify the dispatcher that they're derailed. And they provide as much information from a safe location as they can to the train dispatcher. That's when 911 is called. So the important thing is that, as you could imagine, derailments are not quiet events. And in a fairly populated area like around here, if we have an incident, you're going to get 911 calls. Okay, so what we ask, and sometimes we go through the 911 calls after the incident. Let's say the 911 center gets 60 calls for train derailment, and they never reach out to the railroad and say, hey, you guys have a problem. So in that case, the community may have that information before our train dispatcher. Remember, our train crew's walking that train. So every dispatch center should have our emergency contact telephone number, which, as Courtney said, is located. It's posted at every grade crossing. There's no reason why you don't know what it is. 1-800-832-5452. You call that number and you say, look, we're in Washougal and we're having people report a train derailment. Our dispatchers will know exactly the train that's in that area, and we'll send you or email you or fax you that train list, the listing of all the hazardous materials in that train. Second to that, there's a new application that first responders can have. It's called Ask Rail. And with that information, all they have to do is, with an iPhone or a Droid phone, punch in the car, initial car number, and it'll pull up all the hazmat information for that car. And later on in 2015, we'll be able to pull up all the hazmat information for the train. So my point is that that information is really immediately available to first responders. Also, the train crew has the training. But again, it's a bit of a two-way street. That if you get notification of an incident, you know, one of those first calls after you call the Daytona Fire Department is that they contact us and make sure that we know exactly what they know, and we provide our information.
All right, thank you. And in the presentation, you mentioned a bit about monitoring the temperature of the bearings and the flat spots on the wheels, but aside from that, is there any other inspection that takes place with that message concerning the cars themselves?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of inspection because of time, you know, put everything in. Plus, I don't want to bore people with all the railroad specific information. So every car is inspected every time a train is put together and every 1,000 miles. So when Chris's crew in Vancouver builds a train, before it departs Vancouver, it's required to have a mechanical inspection. So a carman looks at each one of those cars in the train. So it's done then and every 1,000 miles. So normally, they'll probably get inspected at crew change points. So in Pasco they'll be inspected, Vancouver they'll be inspected. And then the individual tank cars themselves get inspected under DOT regulations. So they actually clean out the tank car, do non-destructive testing to make sure the welds are proper. So there's a lot of different inspection and testing that is done other than the track inspection and the roll-by inspections that are available.
Okay, thank you again. I had a question from a constituent in our area that I didn't have an answer to. And that's concerning, I guess, maybe leakage or spillage. Do the rails lose any crew along the way in any way for some reason?
Yeah, so far this year, 2014, we moved about 2 million hazmat shipments. 2 million hazmat shipments. And so far this year, we've only had 2 derailments that caused 2 packages to release some of their contents. None of them were in Washington State. So 2 million shipments, 2 releases, partial releases of those cars. And those are what we call accident-caused releases. Of those 2 million shipments, we have had about a little less than 200 what we call non-accident-caused releases. And why don't we call it an accident release? It's not caused by a derailment or collision. Normally, it's a valve or fitting that is loose. Typically, it loses less than 5 gallons of product, but each one of those we're required to report to the Department of Transportation. So, you know, the numbers are 2 million hazmat shipments. So far this year, 2 accident-caused releases and less than 200 of the non-accident-caused releases. Normally, we find those non-accident-caused releases during those mechanical inspections. So as the car inspector, the carman is looking at the cars, they'll see it, smell it, or hear the release of a hazardous material, and then we respond.
Okay, that's thank you. I guess the same person asked me if the cars have any vents or if they vent any vapors at all.
So every tank car in the United States, or actually North America, regardless of whether it contains hazardous materials or non-hazmat would be corn syrup, molasses, beer, or all in tank cars, wine in tank cars, are required to have some sort of pressure relief device that protects us, the responders, in the event of a fire, that it releases pressure when the pressure builds up, just like a pressure cooker has a pressure relief valve. But if the car is loaded properly and the valve is working properly, it should never release in transportation.
Okay, I have a question. It's been communicated to our school board that this cargo, the oil, is volatile and the cars can explode. Is that true?
So, is it communicated to the school board?
Yeah, we've had presentations from groups that have come in and told us that volatile, it can explode, it has, and maybe not Burlington Northern, but
So,
have this problem.
by definition, it's a hazardous material, and it is no more flammable than normal gasoline. So gasoline in a transport truck that moves down the highway, that goes to the gas station, it's really the same danger, same hazard as a crude oil train. So could you have a fire? Is it volatile? It's less volatile than the normal gasoline that you put in your
Well, it is like you communicated that it's a 1 mile blast zone.
So that is a gross exaggeration.
How about a half mile? Because we have schools where they
So,
usually a half mile.
and I technically, it's not a detonation like you have in a stick of dynamite. There's no overpressure. So, not to get too technical, but in an explosion, when you have detonation, like an incident that I had in West Texas that everybody saw some of the video, those are overpressures. And overpressure will blow up windows. Overpressures will hurt or kill people from the overpressure. Crude oil or flammable liquids do not have enough energy to cause that type of overpressure. In all the incidents that have been publicized, there has been no overpressures causing explosions, blowing up windows, that type of thing. So there's really no blast zones. There was no blast zones.
So when they talk about an incident that occurred in Canada, you're unaware of this because it was related evidently to this same product.
So Quebec was the fire was from burning crude on the ground, was not from a blast per se. None of the fatalities were caused by blast. It was all caused by the crude oil caused buildings that burn.
And that was a mile.
So
I think that's what they're.
So the issue is, does it cause a blast zone? The answer is no. Could any liquid flow a mile? It's possible, but it's going to flow downhill. It's going to act as water. So could water flow a mile? Yeah, it's just going to take a lot of water to flow a mile. So it's going to flow just like water. So it's no more flammable than gasoline. In fact, it's less flammable than gasoline. Have we talked to the school boards about that? We don't reach out to the school boards and provide that information. However, we do provide hazmat traffic flow information to first responders, to emergency management people. All they need to do is go to BNSF.com. In communities, there's a button that you push, and you just ask for a hazmat traffic flow. As long as you have your first responder, emergency manager, a mayor, we can provide that information to you.
One thing I will add is that as part of community relations, part of my job is that if there's a community group or a school board that wants to hear from us, I'm happy to arrange that. We do work with schools on a variety of different levels. One of the things that we've been working on, and Pat's group has done a fantastic job with, is we do what are called tabletop exercises. We've done some in Scott County, Spokane, in Puget Sound, where you'll have all the regulatory agencies, so whether it's the Department of Ecology, WashShot, local first responders, different community members, Red Cross and others, go through what a scenario could look like. So what would happen if a derailment happened here? What happens in the first 5 minutes, first 10 minutes, first 30, and on from there? And you go through that planning scenario and take a look at, when we do shelter stay instead, what would those look like? Who's responsible? And so we work through those scenarios. And so school board, an important part of that, because of the schools and others, we want to kind of work through that. So that's something that definitely we could provide to the community and work through with some of the regulatory agencies down here.
Yeah, so when you talk about that training that you're going to give, maybe you could add that to some of the training.
Yeah, we can definitely look into hilltop exercises.
I have another question of the school or a concern is, you know, the tracks go right through the community. So we have lots of kids on the other side of the tracks from the schools. And they cross those tracks. I know they're not supposed to. They should go over to the crossings and that, but they cross those tracks. And with more traffic, and we have a concern. We have a concern that somebody's going to get hurt.
So there is a group called Operation Lifesaver, and they're a national organization. They have chapters throughout the U.S., and they have a very active chapter here in Washington State. And it's focused on road safety. The main message is see tracks, stay trained. And so I'd be happy to work with you to connect you with that group to talk about road safety, what you need to do, why it's important, you know, just the fundamental physics of a train. You can't stop on a dime, why you should be paying attention. I know kids think they're invincible and that it's not going to happen to them, but we talk through that. We have folks who have been, unfortunately, their lives have been altered because they were hit by a train, and those folks are available to talk to kids, really kind of bring that home to them. And that's something, as traffic increases, again, as the population continues to grow, you're going to see more traffic both on the roads, on the rail, and marine. And there's a conversation that needs to happen to talk about, you know, how we're running safely with trucks, with vehicle traffic, with rail, airplanes, and all other modes of transportation.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Just, you know, the kids are going to change, and they're not going to all get that. And I mean, has anybody thought of pedestrian crossings and, you know, in between some of the crossings? I mean, is there any funding? I'm hearing all of it. There's no funding from.
Well, and that's really from a city perspective. That would be from a city budget cost perspective. That's something we'll talk to the city about.
Okay.
I have a quick question. For an emergency that occurs, a lot of it you said is going to be local responders. Is there a fund set aside for local communities to access immediately should an emergency happen? We've all heard about people needing to be housed, money being short, difficult to get a hold of. Is there easy access to money should there be an emergency?
So the answer is yes. So when I said that the response is not only the community, BNSF is going to be responding shoulder to shoulder with first responders. When we have an incident that causes people to be displaced, evacuation, that type of thing, what we'll do is we'll bring in our claims group and quickly set up a claim center. And normally what we'll do is go out to some of the local hotels that are not affected by the incident and buy out as many rooms as we can so people have a place to go. Red Cross sets up shelters. However, a lot of people, and Red Cross does a great job, and we help them out as much as we can. But a lot of people don't want to stay in the Red Cross shelter. They would rather be in a room by themselves with their family, with TV, with kids that will have homework to do, all that type of thing. A hotel is normally a better place for them, so we'll buy out hotel rooms and let people stay in those hotel rooms, direct pay to the railroad. And then obviously, when you have an incident and you ask to leave, you don't have a lot of time to put a lot of things together. So we'll set up a claim center that people can get some spending money to take care of incidentals while they're out of their homes. And then after they get back in their homes, then we'll come around and settle whatever claims that we have. So to answer your question, yes, we'll provide assistance to people that have been displaced.
I'll add on to that is we also reimburse the cities and the fire departments when there's an incident as well. So we realize that it's an incident in many ways. Maybe not the right word, but it is definitely something that impacts the community greatly. So we want to be responsible with that. Even if the incident happens on a railroad and it's not the railroad's fault and an 18-wheel went through and hit that or something like that, we still take responsibility for that. And we don't want the community to put out any more than they already are because of the incident. So if we can get those plans that are set up, get those checks to folks, get those money to folks, make sure that they're comfortable as we can get them. We want to get it right.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, I think I heard Pat say that back in crude is no more flammable than any other crude. But that flies in the face of what I'm reading.
Actually, I never said that. I said that Bakken crude is no more flammable than gasoline. Bakken crude is no more, so crude oil goes from being as volatile as methane, which is the natural gas that you have, many of us have in our homes, okay, all the way to asphalt. So every crude, depending on how old the formation is, will be volatile to the point that it wants to be a gas, methane, for example, to something that really kind of wants to be a solid asphalt. So Bakken crude is in that middle part that really is a volatile, flammable liquid. There are other formations of shale oil that is more volatile than Bakken. Permian down in Texas is more volatile than Bakken. So it's when I said it's less flammable than less volatile than gasoline, that's true. But I never said it was not volatile or flammable.
Okay, thank you. And then I apologize. I think this will be my final question. And I'm going to just derail the conversation, unintended, for just a moment. And I want to talk about coal for a quick second, because coal dust is a huge concern of ours. My city is in the Columbia River Gorge, and a lot of the images and reports that we see are accumulation of coal, both along the sides of the tracks as well as in the river. So I heard in this presentation a little bit about air quality monitoring, and I'm hoping you can just address that very quickly.
Well, I can talk about where mitigations are as far as coal dust. So BNSF about almost 10 years ago recognized that coal dust was an issue. We were seeing it as an issue in the Powder River Basin, where the coal is primarily mined that we move, and that's in Montana and Wyoming. We saw that as an issue. It was causing maintenance problems for us and causing a host of other issues. And so we spent a lot of time, a lot of effort doing testing, doing a lot of work to figure out what was the problem and how to mitigate that. And so we put together a rule that's twofold. One, it's how you load the coal. So when you see the coal trains coming through, they kind of look like a bread loaf shape. So how you profile that coal makes it more wind resistant, it makes it more aerodynamic, if you will. And then what we discovered is that if you put a topping agent or surfactant, we have 5 different types. You spray that on, and the topping agents have to be shown to be 85% effective and reducing coal dust compared to an untreated part. Most of them test around 92–93%. So you include that on that reduces coal dust. And so the maintenance issues that we're seeing in the Powder River Basin, we're not seeing that anymore. We certainly are not seeing that. We've never seen those kind of maintenance issues out here in Washington. Before any of the interest in the coal export facilities, we are not aware of any coal dust complaint filed with the Clean Air Agency in the state of Washington, nor with the railroad. Something else that we're doing is that just kind of the continued evolution of the coal dust mitigation, make sure that we have continued layers of protection. Again, this is another redundant layer to a very well mitigated process, is that we're building a respray center in Pasco. And so that will, again, once the coal trains come into Pasco, they'll get a second spray, and as they go up. So again, it's something that we think we have a very good mitigation program. This respray center adds another layer to already well established mitigation program. And that respray center should be coming online here at the end of the year.
I had a question on the spills program from the Department of Ecology. I'm assuming that Burlington Northern is working with the governor on that, with the Department of Ecology on their focus on 2014 marine and rail oil transportation study and their draft findings, and then their program that would go from 2015 to 2017 in implementation. Are you involved with that?
Yes, very intimately. Had and Justin, others from this team have been working very closely, providing a lot of information Reclamation, Department of Ecology before the report was issued. We're still studying the report that was just issued and looking through those recommendations. But the bottom line is if we don't have safe operation, we're not going to be in business. And so that's why we have extensive plans. We have geographic response plans. We have ones that are very specific to bodies of water. We have ones for Spokane River. We have one specific for Columbia River Gorge, well, the whole entire Columbia River, if you will. And so we are working very closely with the state, and we'll continue to invest where we need to be safe and work with all the states where we operate, including looking at this plan and where it makes sense for us.
I do have a question. You just talked about this blocking crude, so that is what is currently coming through Washougal, is that correct?
Yeah, the vast majority of all crude oil coming through Washougal is bottom.
Are we getting some of the shale though from North Dakota?
No, not currently. So I struggle with saying specifics because you do have some wells that the Niobrara, which is in the Wyoming, Montana area, and the North Dakota Bakken, which is both North Dakota and Minnesota or Montana. Those two formations are very close to one another. So to say it's always 100% Bakken crude, I'm uncomfortable saying that. But the vast majority is Bakken crude that is coming.
So what is the difference in these cars that contain this product, either one? The current ones that you're using versus, say, the highest standard that they could possibly implement in the near future?
So again, I said earlier that the legacy, the new standard that the railroads will want the DOT to go. Now, the DOT could always go to even a higher standard or a lower standard. Our recommendation was a tank car that's 80% better than the legacy DOT 111 tank car at 50 miles an hour. So it's 80% better. So what the Department of Transportation does is really up to them at this point in time. So it could be a better tank car that we ask for. It could be something less than we ask for.
Well, if you think that this car should be 80% better, why wouldn't you just make cars that are 80% better to protect?
So
I know it's not cost effective.
Well, but it's again, we would like to say everybody needs to use this car, but as I talked about earlier, as a common carrier, we cannot say that. Our customers are doing an excellent job of getting those CPC 1232 cars to market just as fast as they can. But again, there's an issue sometimes on the amount of cars that a facility can build in a period of time. So there's more than just an economic, there's just a physical constraints of getting those cars to market.
So this BNSF.com, if you can call in to find out when the hazmat trains are coming through, does that also tell you the type of car that the...
No, so what I talked about earlier is to get a hazmat traffic flow, and it's not we call you up and say there's a crude oil train coming through. That's not what that does. What that does is provides a comprehensive list of all hazardous materials that move through a city or county in a quarter or 12-month time period. So we provide that information. It's an Excel spreadsheet, so it's not only crude oil, but it's ethanol, it's propane, it's all the materials that meet the DOT definition for hazardous material that go through the community. So it's not a call up kind of system.
Okay, thank you.
One would add on to that, and that's designed for first responders, emergency management, those folks who need that. And so for that, and that's that whole list of hazardous materials. For Bakken crude that is coming through the state of Washington, that information is available through the state, and that's posted. And the website states, you know, I guess that are wrong, but again, all the railroads are required to report that into the state emergency response council. And we do provide that information, and it takes a look at what the train counts are for various counties, both for the class ones, the short lines, and anyone who's moving walking through to the state.
So I was just thinking, for us in Longview, like many of the others here, the grade separations are important to us. And so I'm just curious, to what level is BNSF willing to participate in funding some of the grade separations?
From a federal perspective, it's usually around 5%, and that is for the, it's not for the overall project, it would be for the physical structure itself. So usually what we want to see is a grade crossing closed. And so then the physical structure, whether that's an overpass or underpass, is usually up to 5%. It could be more, it could be less, depending on the situation. It's really a case-by-case situation there. But that's really the beauty of some of these, like the fast corridor or the coalition, because you're able to pull money in, really look at up front, you know, identify those projects along that route or in that region, and really look to getting all that money, pulling those resources together, so it's not just a case-by-case. And we have 32,500 route miles in our network, and we run thousands of communities. So we understand that every grade crossing, every project is important. We have to really kind of look at those priorities of where we can spend money, where we can help, where we can. But again, like tiger grant applications, we help with those. We look for ways to partner and with the cities and states as we're looking through those type of programs.
So on a case-by-case basis, BNSF will go above that 5%?
On a case-by-case basis, yes. We can look at that. Again, it's, you know, it really depends on the priority of the situation. So I'm not going to guarantee you that for a particular project out here we go above 5%. Again, that's something from a case-by-case perspective. But generally it's 5%.
What is the increase in traffic, 2015? What's the scheduled increase for Washington?
That, we can't predict that right now. It really is going to depend on what the market's going to look like. I don't know the answer to that. Traffic will increase, but what that's going to look like, I don't know at this juncture.
And how much time is there between cars? I mean, you know, back to what Paul was saying about the traffic. I mean, there must be an allowance that you have in there so that traffic can clear in all these non-separated grades.
So again, it depends on the flow. If there's a bunch of west towns coming, then they just run through the community and crossings are really not blocked hardly at all. So when you talk about an east-pass and east-west kind of deal, now would be the time that it takes a train to say move from, if they're at Kansas or Vancouver, out to Washougal, versus a train that's moving from Washougal west into Vancouver. So there's really no exact answer. But we you know, I mean, our goal from a transportation side is we have a green light, it's like we do on cars. There's a red light when you stop. So, and again, you know, the speed limit is such that you know, you really should be impacting the community as little as possible with the speed of travel through. You guys have a quiet zone here. I mean, it's pretty much a quiet zone now here for the campus. And on the west side, there's, you know, 2 different locations, actually 3 different locations now in the Oakland Highway that are all quiet zones. So as far as you know, mitigating that impact, as far as noise, which you do hear some things with that, that's getting less and less. And now downtown with Jefferson Street and 8th Street being closed, really the only crossing is at 11th Street, heading north, and then Hill Street if we're heading Portland. So there's no other adequate crossing down right in the airport. So.
Any questions?
So what can we do locally that's short of having a whole lot of money to trains that are stopped and standing that can basically tie up those crossings in the driveways. And, you know, of course, when you mentioned the additional siting that they go into the east side of Washington, you know, we've got 2 or 3 driveways down there that are completely impacted by that. And I know a couple of the older folks down there that, you know, those trains are sitting there. You know, you see the cars parked on the north side, and they're going under, they're going over, they're going however to get back home, and that type of stuff. And that's a little bit worse for me than the derailments themselves. Burlington Road, at least in our respects, has always been extremely good with the city marshal. I think they with the city of Kansas this year. I mean, that improvement going through the middle as well, which one makes it safer, 2 creates that quiet zone for our downtown. What things can we do to better set ourselves to help mitigate the impacts that this is going to sound bad, we all have in our community? Obviously, we don't get the choice to stop you. We don't really get the choice of whether you not put on those or the times that they come through. I'm one of those unfortunate people that, you know, I've had 2 times when I've been stopped at what I'll call the perfect storm intersection. And I've identified what that is. And from the time I pulled up to the time I got through the crossing, I was able to move freely, I guess. First time it was 17 minutes, and the second time it was 15 minutes. I had literally had to throw an orange on the tracks I was so close to, but just couldn't get across. So those types of things are really what worry us, and making sure that things continue to move around our community, that our community continues to be acceptable for folks that both live here and have businesses here, and not experience those kind of times. I don't think there's any magical question or answer to it, but are there things that we should be doing locally that we're not?
I think these kind of ongoing dialogues are important so we can identify those issues, we can have really good conversations. But I would also encourage you to look at those alliances that make sense. From a regional perspective, I believe there's a group forming down here in Southwest Washington. I can get information on that. To really look at what are those projects, how do we keep things moving. I think, again, dollars are tight, whether it's on the public or the private side. So the formation of alliances, whether it's across the Northern Tier, down by I-4, down the Columbia River Gorge, or even in the state, even the concept of a fast 3. There's been 2 iterations of fast border, and a fast 3 throughout the state is a great idea to kind of look at, all right, where do those public dollars come from? Where do those private dollars come from? And pulling in all like-minded folks to make sure that we understand what the impact of our community, what the long-term vision is, and how we can work together to identify those projects and where the appropriate money comes from. So I think just a continuing dialogue, and I can help get you in contact with some of the more folks in our private-public partnership group, and then also I'll find out a little bit more about that group that's forming down here to kind of look at freight mobility and put you in contact with them.
Other questions for me? Thank you for being here.
We appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully, that didn't fly up here from Florida.
Oh, wow.
But thank you for taking the time. Thank you for allowing us to expand this and listen to the community.
Absolutely, and we appreciate the questions. It was very thoughtful questions, and hopefully we were able to give you information that was useful. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll always do our best to get you information. Maybe not the answers that everyone always wants to hear, but we will do our best to get you information that we can. And thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And we do have 2 of our fire chiefs, fire chief and our division chief who mentioned maybe you can give some of the information that we're on those right emails as far as training, that kind of stuff.